With that, I'd like to briefly introduce the first champion of the group, the reigning undefeated president of Intertribal Timber Council, Philip Rigdon.
All right, thanks, Jim. Okay, so first of all, this has been a great collective day of kind of talking about the different things that we've been working on, and this idea of anchor forest, the IFMAT report, the TFPA, all of these things are collectively there's been a lot of work that Intertribal Timber Council and the tribes and this conversation that we have. I got to get closer. Okay, speak. And so I think it's an important time onto what we're doing and how and what's the vision that we'd like to see. And so what is our roles and responsibilities? And I think it's an important conversation. The place where tribes step up and try to see and do activities to protect our interest, our land, but it's also these lands, although they're not our reservations anymore, these are still the lands that our people have come from, that we're tied to, that connection to those places are an integral part of what makes it unique to us and the importance of those things. And so, there's whole questions that we do. What role do we play for, on reservation and off reservation, and what are those opportunities? What is that place where we can play that role and take those concerns and make them a priority? I think it's important. Do you have the support from your leadership, both within the tribe and outside of the tribe, and with the community in general? And I guess what I'm saying is our tribal council, our elected officials, all the way to our top administrators, the executive directors, to the person that is actually going to be working directly with the Forest Service or BLM or the state officers and trying to make these things happen. And that also includes, and at Yakima, we have a separation between our mill and the economic enterprise and the government, and making sure that commitment is there too. And I guess it is a real key component. You can't hear in the back? You got the regular mic? So are you willing to commit resources to these activities? That's a real question and the challenge, because especially we've been doing these reports, these conversations. You look at IFMAT 3, and I know that I've walked into Forest Service meetings, and there's 2 of us, and they got 10 of them, and you're sitting there, and they're saying they don't have enough resources to carry out the task, to do the work, and that's one of the big challenges that you have. You have limited resources, and can you do these things and really make them happen? And understanding who are the major players, the roles and the responsibilities, who can you build into to work in those groups. And an important part, we have 1,000 years of managing our landscape and the role that we play in doing that. And as you notice, we do share quite a few slides with each other, with a lot of the presentations that we've had. And so I want to talk a little bit about our tribe, the Yakima's approach, and the things that we're seeing. We want to preserve, protect, and enhance the resources that are related to us with our treaty rights and those associated parts of the land. Resources go, beyond the reservation, out into the ceded territory. And for us, the usual and custom, and those things that we have links and ties associated with them. Historically, our role at the Yakima, we played in the fishery role, but there's other places I think that are really important for us. How can we play a role in the collaborative, in the different collaboratives within Washington State? The North Central Forest Health Collaborative, the Toposh, South Gifford Pinchot Collaborative. These are all roles that our tribe can play a role in. So, but really the concept I wanted to talk about was co-management, and I think this is a really important concept. In the fisheries world, under USP Oregon, USP Washington, and a bunch of the fish cases and those type of things, we retained our right for half the fish. And we had a choice. We saw the fish runs deteriorating and disappearing, and the role that they has. And so instead of sitting there and waiting for those things to continue to dwindle, the tribe took a different approach. We claimed the co-management not just to catch the fish, but also to restore those resources. And we put a lot of effort to that. And in that context, we do these things for fisheries, for wildlife, with an array of things, elk, deer, and you can just go down the line of those things. Water. This spring, I've been talking water almost every day due to the drought and the conditions that you're seeing in the eastern part of Washington State. It's this conversation and our role of protecting our interests and our rights is an important part of it. But it's the cultural resources. And this is an important part that I think is, at least from our tribe, is the first principle is, the tribes owned everything when the non-Indians showed. And we always used the resources that the land offered, and we were connected. And I don't know if it's owned everything, but we were connected to these places, and it was ours. The second principle is that the treaty was not a grant of rights to us, to the Indian people. It was actually a grant of rights from us and a reservation of those that were not granted. And we retained those things, those connections to these places, this land, the ability to fish, the ability to go, and I think that's an important concept into and how we want to look at this is we retain the rights to go up into the Forest Service and have healthy forests, have that connection to those places that provide the foods and medicines and those things that are connected to our way of life. And so the foundation for us, USC Oregon, USC Washington, the Columbia Basin Fish Accords, Salmon Recovery Boards, and you just can continue to go on. And through that, we were able to implement and do activities that are restoring salmon. So co-management of fisheries is, why not forestry? Why aren't we taking that challenge into that realm? Instead of this paradigm shift of us being collaborators with the Forest Service, what about co-managers? And I think this is an important concept that for some of us, we've been doing that with our restoration of fisheries. Why don't we take that level and start talking in those things? Because we do have they do have a co-management, a trust responsibility to meet some of the objectives on their land management. It's to maintain these things. But we're watching. Last summer, Washington State, we watched 250,000 acres burn up, and how much damage was caused to resources that we valued. What role could tribes, could Yakima, Spokane, Colville, the tribes in Washington State do? We're here in Oregon. This is the same concept. That you look at Coquitlam, the beautiful land that's around them, but what's the opportunity to work with the local forest to do ecosystem type of restoration on their forest, to actually manage them in a way that will enhance the ability to create the type of forests that can support those wildlife species that are important to the tribe and those folks. And so, to use an example, we had a fire. It started on Forest Service. It was a Cold Springs fire in 2008. There's a lava bed. You can't really see it. It's about a 3/4 of a mile lava bed, and we all thought that would catch the fire. It jumped in less than 20 minutes. It was on the reservation, burned through the reservation, and went into Washington State DNR land through this matrix of area. It's these kind of things. If we were more active, if we were taking the co-management effect and doing Tribal Forest Protection Act and having those things done in that relationship. But the one thing, I don't know if it would have changed this, because I think a lot of that upper elevation is what they call the wilderness or those type of designations. But I think that's the conversation. If they start designating wilderness, what does that mean to our ability to protect the reservation and those things that we value? And I think the important thing is using all the tools in the toolbox. Listening to Russ and talking about the A to Z project and looking at the ability and the roles that we can play. The tribes have a unique place. We're doing the restoration work in salmon. Can we come in and do that restoration work, but at the same time treat the uplands? Because if you don't treat the uplands, all of the areas at risk from these large catastrophic fires, including, being the partners, and how can we bring the community together and the roles that we can play in maintaining that connection. And I think that's an important part. You know, we're doing that right now, the Intertribal Timber Council, and the role that the operations, Jim Durglow, Erickson, the folks we're out there doing this connection, trying to bring our farm forward and why these things are a priority. And a really important part for us is those connections with the people you saw today, Butch Blazer. You know, you see the folks that are standing here talking to Indian country and wanting us to be involved in our perspective and bringing the resources and the values that we have. We have Brian Rice here. You got different components of leadership within the Forest Service, BLM. And I think it's those kind of things that are very useful. And just this week, Congress on the House side came out with some legislation and is doing a forestry bill. And they're really interested in working with the tribes to help talk about the Tribal Forest Protection Act and making them more usable for tribes. And it's this kind of, you know, opening up the avenues in the conversation, but also showcasing the abilities of what tribes can do. You go, you talk about going to any tribe and seeing the type of forest activities that are going on across the landscape. It's an important part of our conversation and the community that depends upon it. And there's also, you know, so TFPA, Good Neighbor Authorities, you know, these cooperative agreements. And in that conversation with the state, it's and how we play with that. But sometimes, and trust me, I do understand this, you feel like you're running from one collaborative meeting to another, you know, cooperative thing, and you get a whole one set of people, and then there's a whole other set of different folks. And how do you manage that? How do you sit there and really get to making sure these things are that you're seeing progress, implementation. And I think that's a real key thing as you look at Indian country. We are about seeing things on the ground. And that action on the ground is what has always made us successful. I was talking with someone and they were talking 90% of the dollars that go to the Forest Service for their forest activities is planning. It goes to the planning part. For us, you know, it's probably vice versa. Probably 90% goes to making sure the work on the ground is done right. And I think that's what makes us a lot more flexible and actually can talk about implementing things and those things. And that's the important part. We are the first stewards of the land. We are the people that have always managed our land. We're tied to these and that connection onto what it provided to help our people survive and what it provides to us today and helping us survive in today's world. You know, we are, you know, part of the greater community. We're connected to these places in these times. And the real important part is that includes the reservation, but it includes our ceded territories. And making sure we meet those objectives on our lands as well as adjacent lands. But also, and I'll use our Yakima reservation. Our closed area, we call it the closed area. Our forest isn't open for the general public to come and view. But we do bring folks through. We're going to have the symposium in 2 years at our agency to see where we harvested over 200,000 acres during a budworm outbreak in the late 1990s, and the activity that our tribe did at that time, and the way we responded to that. And you go talk to other tribes that respond to fire salvage or other insect disease. That ability, to us, it seems natural, but if you talk to other federal agencies, it's a real challenge for them. And I think that's something that we should be really proud of. And so, as I kind of wind down, really one of the important parts for us is stepping up as tribes, stepping up to the plate. And really, when you start listening and seeing these presentations, we are in those places, and those roles and those things that are happening. You see what Salish Kootenai is doing with their tribal forest protection. And you talk with Kevin Cedar from Tule River and the activities, and we're all in some way or form wanting to see this activity. Jim, I was talking with Jim, and you're seeing a lot more federal agencies that want to have these workshops with TFPA, but you have that interest from the tribes to go to the Midwest and really bring these conversations forward. How could this work on the coast, on these coastal lands, and the roles that tribes can play. And so I think there's a conversation. And as we move forward through this conversation and we show our ability to how we manage and the direction that we manage our land, it's a great time. And the conversation, we're there in that conversation. And so that goes to the hard work and dedication that our people have done, over the history of this. But it's also, I think it's a unique time. The last point I really want to make is I was talking to one of my leaders, and we were talking about because we have the last mill in our area. If our mill doesn't stay in business, the next mill is 150 miles away. What's the value of your trust resource? It goes to log truck, hauling wood, into another state. The value of that value ties back to there, but it's also, there's 200 jobs that work at the mill. And the opportunity to make sure these things that are maintained is a critical component of what, not just our tribe, but every tribe. We have a mill, but other tribes don't. Salish Kootenai provides their resources to local mills. Those mills need the resources coming off Salish Kootenai. And I'm just saying Salish Kootenai because Jim's standing next to me. But you go all across Indian country, and that connection to these local facilities. When Vaughan Brothers was up here and talking, and the Colville supplying them resources, that's a connection to the forest infrastructure that's necessary for us to be able to do stewardship across the broader landscape. And it's also a value that helps keep our trust resources at a higher value. And I think it's an important part of the conversation that sometimes doesn't always get discussed. If you're going to get $100 per 1,000 board feet, just as an example, and all of a sudden you have an extra 100 miles both ways to go, and you're reducing the value of that by $50. That's just the math of the thing. So how, that's the important, building that infrastructure so the values for our own resources are there. And I think that's a really important part. But I thank you for this opportunity, and I think as you see this dynamic conversation going forward, it's good to see that, and it's good to watch how many people are engaged in this conversation. I think tribes, we have a leadership role that we could play on the national conversation, but we have a leadership role that we play at home on our land, and both of those things are critical. So thank you.